It's getting hotter, and we are causing it. That's the title of this talk. And that simple statement has been in hot dispute for many years now. and so a good deal of this talk is to justify it, though it really doesn't need justification. It, in some people's minds, it does. I've given talks on this topic before, most recently at a Humanist meeting last March, and this video has it. I gave a talk on climate change here in 2012, very similar to what's here today, but I've updated it because it's hotter now than it was then. And there's more evidence now than there was then. And I also talked here in 2011 on my book, Our Improbable Universe, which has motivated me, actually, to give these talks on climate change, because this book's about how this incredible universe we have took 14 billion years plus 17 aspects of physical law to be more or less exactly the way they are, in order for its raw energy, the Big Bang, to evolve into this incredible reality that we now have, where we can pretty much accomplish everything that our ancestors prayed for, we can do for ourselves now. But because of our addictions to fossil fuels and to playing serial Russian roulette with nuclear holocaust, we threaten to throw it all away in the blink of a cosmic eye. And I'm just outraged by this. I'm just absolutely outraged by it. You know, and so I've been giving talks on climate change, which is ever since. Okay. It's called anthropogenic global warming. Terrible phrase. AGW, you know, but anyway, that's what they use, so I have to use that terminology. I'm future-oriented. Right now we're at a turning point. We could generate a good living or a living hell for our children. It's in the balance right now. We really could have a living hell for them. It's in the balance. Iroquois councils began with, let us make a decision that is good not just for today or tomorrow or just this generation or the next, but good for 7 generations hence. These are Native Americans, lived hundreds of years ago. They had foresight that we don't have now. You know. I want justice for our descendants and our ancestors. Our descendants deserve a world that works. We threaten to hand them a planet that is cooked because we got to drive around in these monster mobiles because they have that image or whatever it is that motivates us to drive these ridiculous cars and consume carbon at an outlandish rate. And our ancestors lived incredibly difficult lives. We have no appreciation what hard lives they lived to get us to this incredible reality we have now. And they'd be rolling over in their graves if they could see how blithe we are about it, and so willing to just throw it all away. It's unbelievable. I want justice for the impoverished human beings who are going to suffer first for this thing. They're suffering right now. 1,000 of them are drowning in the Mediterranean every year, because sub-Saharan Africa is unlivable now. They can't live there anymore. They're migrating to Europe. So a significant number of them, percentage, are drowning in the Mediterranean. I want justice for the endangered species, who Greta Thunberg, a 16-year-old gal, has pointed out the extinction rate is at least 1,000 times larger than what is natural. Because again, we have to drive around in pigmobiles. Or whatever, you know. It's just, I'm almost speechless. The scientific consensus on AGW is fact. None of 928 papers on AGW that were available in 2003 disputed it. 928 papers, none of them disputed it. More recently, A survey done that was published in the Free Inquirer, a Humanist magazine. Survey done of articles in 2013 where the abstracts were searched for global warming. Turned up 25,000 articles with 69,604 authors. 4 were climate deniers out of 69,604. That's 1 part in 10,000. The evidence is overwhelming. The last 5 years have been the hottest on record. 50% more carbon dioxide is in the air now than 200 years ago. 18 of the warmest years have occurred in the last 19. The warmest half century in the last 1,300 years. We're up now 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit globally, much more in the Arctic. 26 once in 500 year storm events in this decade. This is an Allstate ad. They have to pay the damages, so they're advertising it. Worst California wildfires were in 2018, 9 of the 10 largest since 2003. And we just had the wettest 12 months ever in America. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Dollars speak and censorship abounds. We have the golden rule. Those with the gold make the rule. $2 billion was spent on the 2016 election. The Koch brothers budgeted almost half of this. Environmental ads are frequently refused by TV carriers because of fear that some sponsors will be offended. A Bush administrative operative tried to shut up famous climatologist James Hansen in the early 2000 time frame with, "There will be consequences," if he continues talking about AGW. When the Republican head of a science committee at that time heard about this, he was outraged and had an investigation. They found out that this Bush operative had to be fired because his resume was totally fudged. He didn't even have a bachelor's degree. This business about lying is not a new thing. It's been going on for a long time. Paul Krugman's pointed this out. And part of the reason why it's been going on for a long time is because it's been normalized by fossil fuel lying. The fossil fuel industry has normalized it and has made it a part of our political process. Philip Mote was scrubbed from a presentation at a high school in Montana. Efforts to ban the term climate change in Florida and North Carolina have been made. And more recently, Trump limited the national climate assessment to projections shy of 2040. No projections beyond 2040. Anything beyond 2040, censored. Examples of silence on climate change by the networks. The People's Climate March in September 2014 had 300,000 participants. It's a beautiful demonstration. Look at this. It wasn't carried by ABC, CBS, and NBC. Marched right under their windows. Fox News carried it. Record wildfires burned in California 2015, but climate change was not mentioned in hundreds of network stories on the subject. The only mention I heard of it was CBS stating that 2015 was on track to be the warmest year on record. That's all that was said. Lying is a huge problem. 90% of the public doubt the scientific consensus, yet it's 1 part in 10 to the 4th, in 10,000, are deniers. 90% of the public think there is not scientific consensus because they have been lied to. They've been propagandized. And it started way back in 1977. I just found out about this last December, an article in New Yorker magazine. James F. Black, senior scientist for ExxonMobil, told management in Manhattan that there was general scientific agreement that the most likely way in which mankind is influencing the global climate is through carbon dioxide release from the burning of fossil fuel. General scientific agreement, 1977, 42 years ago. They've been lying for 42 years. The reason why I'm using the L word now is because I knew what the reality was, and they've been telling it different. That's lying. They had no doubt about what the reality was. They've known for 42 years. After James Hansen gave a 1988 congressional testimony, an Exxon public affairs manager advised, emphasize the uncertainty. And they've been doing that very successfully ever since, because now 90% of the public thinks that there is not scientific consensus. Yet I just gave you the data on it. 1 part in 10 to the 4th are deniers. Scientific consensus on anthropogenic global warming has been a fact for decades. Fossil fuel industry propaganda has been lying about this successfully for 3 decades at least. Talk about one of the ways they're lying about it now is that they've stopped denying that the world's getting hotter, and now they're saying, oh, it's just natural fluctuation. That's the next fallback position. You know, oh, it's just natural fluctuation. Okay. All right. Well, this is the historical record of when the cherry blossoms come out in Japan since 800 AD. Okay. Here it goes. Yeah, here's fluctuation. Boom. This is where we're at now. 2 weeks earlier. This is what's been happening because of our global warming. So this is not natural fluctuation. You know, you don't see anything like this spike in this 1,200-year record.
The purple is the real. Is the data.
This is the data. Yes.
The gray or the brown is a fit or something.
Well, the solid line is a fit to all the data points. Yes.
But if somebody doesn't have a mic, you have to repeat the question.
Oh, the question is, you know, what are the dots and what is the line? Yeah.
And the gray bars.
What are the dots mean?
The dots are the actual year by year when the cherry blossoms showed up. There's 1,200 dots there. There should be. Yeah. Okay. This is a historical record now going back to 200 AD, based on a whole bunch of surrogates, like corals, tree rings, all sorts of other things. And again, you see fluctuations, yes, but here is what's happening now. It's unprecedented. %98 of the glaciers in the world are in retreat. This is a glacier in Greenland melting. And this water going down to the base, you know, lubricates the base and will cause the thing to move more rapidly. Now, we have enough carbon in the air now to guarantee that Greenland will melt. But it's going to take a long, long time. Thousands of years, perhaps. But it will melt, because there's never been this much carbon in the air when Greenland has had ice. The last 5 years were the warmest ever recorded. 1 degree C rise since 1880. And the Arctic has warmed by 3 degrees C. This is very important because the North warms more rapidly than the equator, because you're putting a blanket over the entire Earth, and that blanket has more of an effect in the North, where you get less sunlight coming in. The North gets warmed by air going up there from the south. So that blanket has a bigger effect in the North. Well, that north-south temperature difference is what drives the jet stream, and I'll get back to that. Okay? The north-south temperature difference has diminished by 2 degrees centigrade. And that's an important effect. Now, you cannot blame a particular wildfire on climate change, of course. But what you can say without any doubt is that the number of wildfires has doubled. And that's what this slide shows. Okay. This is what wildfires would have been without climate change. This is what they are. Okay, this is the line of what they are. This is what they would have been, based on extrapolating, with computer models. This is what wildfires pretty much are today. This is what they will be in 2040, 2070. Oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to project beyond 2040. Sorry. This is global projections, okay? Low emissions, moderate emissions, high emissions, and we're on track to be high emissions because we're doing precious little to change the reality. And this is the end of the century, and again, this is what's being censored. Okay, and this is where we would be in 2030. This is where we're going. And okay, the high end of this is 15 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is 15 degrees up in the far north. It's really grim. I mean, when our children are going to be looking back and saying, those idiots, they're going to be cursing us to their dying day for doing nothing on this subject. Effectively nothing. Okay, this is not a computer model. This is James Lovelock's projection of where forests will be in the future if we have a temperature rise of 5 degrees centigrade. So here's where they are today. Here's where they'll be in the future for a 5 degrees centigrade temperature rise. And that's kind of what they're projecting for the end of the century if we keep going the way we're going, and we're showing every sign of not changing course. That is, the Arctic Circle is about the only place we're going to...
What's the difference between projection and simulation?
This is not a computer simulation.
In the coronary say projection for 5 degrees, not a simulation. But there's a difference.
Well, this is, James Lovelock is guessing here. He's not doing a computer simulation. A computer simulation is where you actually,
I'm skeptical about simulation.
Well, I would be more skeptical about just projection. Yeah, excuse me.
Why don't you just say a
You're not
yes?
repeating the question.
Oh, yes, right. Okay, the question was, what's the difference between a projection and a simulation? This is based on a guesstimation of where forests will be, based on his intuition or whatever. I don't know what his algorithm was for coming up with this. Okay, and a computer simulation, you have a model that involves a huge number of inputs and algorithms and all sorts of things, and then you compare that to the reality. You change things, you compare it to the reality, you change it, you adjust things until you're simulating reality pretty well, and then you use it to try to simulate reality in the future. I would have more confidence in a computer simulation. Okay, this is a computer simulation of where rain will be in the end of the century. And basically it says that if you have enough rain, you'll get more. And if you don't have enough rain, you'll get less. So, and one of the important things is the bread basket of America will be getting less. That's very important. And sub-Saharan Africa will be getting a lot less. Yeah, and yes, yeah, right.
Okay, I'm going to have to start invoking that you have to have raise your hand, I'll bring the microphone to you, because otherwise you have to keep repeating questions over and over again.
I'm sorry, yeah, okay. I keep
Raise your hand, I'll bring the mic.
Okay, now this is a computer simulation of the jet stream instability. Okay, again, based on the fact that the north-south temperature difference has diminished. And this was an article that appeared, taken out of an article in Scientific American 2014. Okay, now in this last calendar year, we have had extreme weather due to the fact that the jet stream has been looping north and south much more than anybody has ever seen before. We've had tremendous extremities. The jet stream is moving slower because of this reduction in temperature. And so whatever weather you have is going to last longer. And so you have a big storm, it's going to stay there longer. And because it's looping north and south more, it drags up more hot air from the south, or it drags down more cold air from the north. We've had very cold spells in the north, where I come from in New England, and we've had some very warm spells. It's been really wild. We've never seen anything like this. And this was 2014, this article. Okay, this slide has some tipping effects in it. That is, if you keep heating the world up, there's some things that are hard to calculate. You just don't know exactly what's going to happen. One thing is that open water in the Arctic, as the Arctic gets warmer, the white ice melts, the open water absorbs more sunlight. That's a tipping effect. So now the water gets even warmer. Okay. The warm tundra emits more carbon dioxide because when it warms up, the bacteria say, "Oh, great, I can start reproducing now," and they start gobbling up the carbon-based material there, converting it into carbon dioxide. And you make that bacteria real happy, and they emit a lot of carbon dioxide. There are what I call methyl hydrate deposits at a depth of about 1,000 feet around the continental shelf. It's methane combined with water in a solid ice form. It's been there for millions of years. The release of methyl hydrate deposits caused a major extinction event 55 million years ago. The Paleocene-Ecocene thermal maxima. And if we warm up enough, we'll start releasing those methane deposits. Because the ocean heats up and that becomes unstable, they could release. And of course it's a vicious circle because the methane release makes it hotter, releases more methane, makes it hotter, releases more methane, and it's a vicious circle. It's a tipping effect. The drought induces the demise of forests, and that's what this image is about here. These are areas where forests will find it more difficult to grow, where forest fires will gobble up the forest more because of drought-induced forest fires and inability of the trees to grow. That's a tipping effect. Everyone's counting on the forest eating up the carbon. Well, it goes back into the air. They burn. It goes back into the air. That's a tipping effect. Okay. The Gulf Stream might stop. We don't know exactly what's that going to cause, but Europe might get really cold as a result. But actually, the really big one is the tipping effects that we don't know about. Oh, what the hell? Throw the dice. So what? That's what we're doing. We're taking a gigantic gamble. But we don't know what all the effects are. Okay, this slide here shows projections on gross domestic product. Okay, these areas here are projected to lose 10% of their gross domestic product by the end of the century because of global warming. This is, again, drought in this area here, the farm belt, is going to reduce income by gross domestic product by 10%. By the way, the Great Depression was minus 5% in GDP. Minus 5%. We're talking about 10% here. And it'll probably be worse. Okay, these are some costs of anthropogenic global warming. It's just a long list. I don't want to go through all of this because I don't want to take the time. But, you know, the list goes on and on, you know. You can scan down this. It just, you know, I mean, one thing is, you know, the worst wildfires in California is $30 billion bankruptcy for PG&E, for example. Out of business. Goodbye. All right. Now this slide here is a high school level calculation, so don't glaze over on your eyes. I asked a high school teacher if this was a high school level calculation, a math teacher. She said yes. Okay. Anyway, this is carbon dioxide versus time. It, as measured from the top of a volcano in Hawaii. And these measurements were initiated by a Republican scientist back in the late 50s. And it goes up and down because of seasonal variation. You know, carbon dioxide gets sucked up by the plants, you know, in the growing season. So I've drawn a line to get how much it's increasing per year. And that comes out to be something like 2.7 parts per million per year. Okay, that's here. And then you can convert that, you know, into how much, you know, that corresponds to in terms of gigatons of carbon dioxide. Just because the surface of the Earth is something like, you know, a certain number of square inches. It's up in the, you know, huge number of square inches. You know, you got a sphere. You can work out how many square inches. 14.7 pounds per square inch times 2.7 parts per million times 1.5 because carbon dioxide is denser than air, and you get 2.22 gigatons. Then you go on Google and you say, well, how much carbon dioxide is emitted per year? And it's 36 gigatons. 22 divided by 36 is 60%. 60% of what we emit is staying there. Duh. If we want to stop growing it, we got to reduce what we emit by 60%. This is a very important number. It's gigantic. The Paris Agreement was 25%, and we're not even doing that. This is the only place where you'll see this number, 60%. You don't see it anywhere else. Okay? We need a 60% reduction. We got to stop messing around. 60% is a big number. And Paris comes nowhere near achieving that. Yes?
So that 60% number is number that you calculated, or is that in the literature?
Yes, it's right here. It's on this slide. You can do it yourself. You know.
Is it in the literature, and has it been?
No, you won't find that anywhere.
The 36 gigatons per year.
You could go Google that. You know.
Okay, is that a real number?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so concrete.
Hey, if you don't have the mic, don't be asking questions. Got it?
You have to produce CO2.
Answer his question.
Yeah. No, just a second. Okay, just a second.
I understand a very large percentage of the emitted CO2 is absorbed by the ocean. Do we really need to reduce it by 60%?
We need more than 60% because the ocean is reaching near capacity. And if you want to save the corals, you need more than 60%. And also, in the future, yeah, you're going to need more than 60% because the ocean is reaching capacity, yes.
I've always been troubled by the criticism of the CO2 coming out of cement plants. There's no alternative.
Yeah, I'll talk about that, actually. I have that in later slides. I have an alternative.
You have to live with it.
I have an alternative. The cement is about, cement and steel is about 7% of the problem at this point, but we'll talk about it, yeah. And if you can get carbon-free electricity and generate hydrogen, then you can do cement. Yeah.
Are you going to talk about the capacity of how warming will change the ocean, the warming of the ocean, because it takes about 1,000 years for that whole cycle to occur. Will warming change that?
And I don't go into it extensively. I just point out that, yeah, we need more than 60% in the future because the ocean is giving us some cushion, both in terms of the carbon dioxide and in the thermal effect that you just identified.
If we stop emitting CO2,
Could
we'll
we
be
get on with the
okay.
talk?
Okay, all right.
Well, this is important. No, this is important.
You have to have the mic to ask questions.
Well, how do we do this and continue to breathe?
Well, human breathing isn't a big contributor at this time, but the human breathing is okay. I mean, that's way below the 60%. So we can.
Can we hold the questions until the end, please? He has to get through his slides, huh?
Well, that's okay. I think I can. I think I'm getting. Well, all right. All right. It all adds up. It's getting hotter due to us. This slide here shows the various contributions to this overall warming that is occurring. Aerosols are actually reducing the temperature. That is, when you don't see a clear sky anymore, you see haze when you look out, and that cools things. Land cover is cooling things. Ozone warms things a little bit. If you took out all these effects here, greenhouse warming would actually warm things more than the data. The data is the black line here, and the red line is the fit to the data, including all these 4 effects. It fits very well.
It's true of all animal life, not just humans, but the dogs and the cats and the cows.
Yeah, right. But she's pointing out that all animals emit carbon dioxide, but the numbers are small compared to the 36 billion tons of carbon dioxide that we're presently emitting. The amount that's emitted by animals breathing works out to a few billion tons. We're emitting 36 billion tons.
Sounds like what we need to do is get rid of all animals.
Well, actually, it turns out I'll get onto this a little bit in the future. Anyway, animal flatulence is a big deal. Anyway, because it's methane. Methane is 20 to 40 times more powerful than carbon dioxide. Global emission sources, okay, are shown on this slide here. Okay, power generation is a gigantic one. Okay, cement is here, and steel is here. This is transportation. Okay, this is other industries. Okay, when you want to solve a problem from an engineering point of view, and this is an engineering problem, and this is one of my criticisms of a lot of people who consider themselves green, is that they don't approach it from the point of view of an engineering problem. I've been an engineer for 40 years now. It's an engineering problem. You got to do the numbers. And the first thing you do is you attack the big piece of the problem first. Power generation. We need zero carbon electricity. Zero carbon. Not renewable, zero carbon. Okay. All right, here's another slide that talks about what can be done. And this is from a New York Times article. Okay, again, it identifies the electricity as being a big piece of the action that we can do. This is what you might get from a carbon tax. By the way, I'm advocating a carbon tax now, so I've changed my tune a little bit, but I'm very goosey about a carbon tax because I'm afraid it might generate votes for climate deniers. Because every time someone goes and puts gas in their tank and looks at the carbon tax ratcheting up on the pump, they're going to want to vote for a climate denier. Because they've already made the decision to be driving that pigmobile when they bought the darn thing. Okay? What you ought to be doing is taxing them when they buy the thing. Tax them when they buy the pigmobile, not when they fill it up. Tax the purchase of it. Don't tax them when at the pump, because they're stuck with it once they're stuck with the pump once they bought the thing. I got a rebate when I bought my Chevy Volt plug-in hybrid, $10,000 rebate between state and federal. Made a big difference on whether or not I purchased it. And so it's a similar thing though. Tax the monster mobiles, use that money to subsidize the fuel-efficient vehicles. At the dealership, and then the person who has a trade and needs a pickup truck, get him to fill out a form. He can get an alleviation from the tax. Sure, if it's a part of his trade, he shouldn't have to pay a tax on it. But the guy who just wants to have like an image of being some kind of, cowboy or something who drives around in a pickup truck, tax that nut, because he's just, feeding his ego or whatever, Okay. I view the pure electric as impractical in New England at this time. You can get away with it in California. These plug-in stations that you have out here in front were the first ones I ever ran into. Okay. I don't run into them in New England. And if I run out of juice in a New England winter in the middle of nowhere, I'm in big trouble. It could be a life-threatening experience. No mommy is going to risk her kids in that situation. She just won't do it. Plug-in hybrids seamlessly switch over to gasoline when they run out of juice. So I drive a plug-in hybrid. 75% of the time I'm on sterling electricity. At that time I'm getting the carbon equivalent of 250 miles per gallon. And the reason why sterling electricity is so low carbon is because it's 1/3 renewable, 1/3 nuclear, and 1/3 natural gas. It's very low carbon electricity. 250 miles per gallon when you're on that kind of electricity. It's here today. It's not pie in the sky future. And the car is great. It's got huge performance. And if I'm at a red light and I have to merge with one of those monster mobiles, I'm a length and a half ahead before they even start moving. The performance is unbelievable.
I understand if everybody had electric.
Please don't answer that question because he's going to keep it up the whole meeting. Just wait till the end.
Are you familiar with the molten salt, thorium?
I'll get onto that. I'll get onto that. Okay, wind and solar versus time, it has been improving. Okay, this is showing the cost of wind and solar versus time. Okay, and it's been getting a lot better, and this red dotted line is considered to be cost effective in terms of regular utility. But these numbers are when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining. Okay, when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining, you need energy storage that works. It's very important. This is the fluctuations that I showed this slide in 2012. And this is the kind of fluctuation that you can get from wind. And it's a real serious thing. There was a time in Europe in 2013 when averaged across Europe, wind and solar for an entire week produced only 10% of rated capacity. For an entire week, 10%. You need what's called base load power. That is power that's there when you throw the switch. Okay, this is solar fluctuation in Arizona. These are three sites in Arizona: Prescott, Yuma, and Scottsdale. This is batteries that are versus time here. This is the cost per kilowatt hour. $500 per kilowatt hour is considered to be competitive. It did pass that around 2012, and it's good, and that's good. And the cost per the weight per the amount of power per liter is on this plot here, right here. That corresponds to about 5 pounds per mile in a car. So if you want to do 200 miles of driving, you need about 1,000 pounds of battery at this point here. That was 2015. It's a lot of battery. It's a lot of extra weight for your car, you know. And that's one of the reasons why a plug-in hybrid, you know, makes sense. You don't have to lug around 1,000 pounds of battery to guarantee you're going to get where you're going. You know. Now, there's another issue about pure electric, though, is that you know, you can build 4 plug-in hybrids for the same amount of scarce materials that you build 1 pure electric, because you need a lot less battery. This is the cost of cobalt versus time, and it started peaking here until Tesla said they weren't going to use cobalt anymore in their batteries. Then it went down. But if we decide that we are going to switch over entirely to pure electric, we've got a problem in terms of just the availability of the scarce materials that you need to make the batteries. And you can make 4 plug-in hybrids with the same scarce materials that you can make 1 pure electric. Okay, in terms of energy storage, this is an example of what's being done today in Sterling, Massachusetts, where I come from. This is a 4 megawatt hour battery system that was set up by Sterling. And Sterling is really, Sean Hamilton, who runs it, is really a climate hero in my mind. And he's received awards from the state for showing how the way into the future. Anyway, he set this up, and he's saving $500,000 per year for the town, because he buys electricity when it's cheap and he sells it when it's expensive. Carbon removal and geoengineering are on this slide here. Now, you can plant trees and harvest the trees, but you got to sequester them. If you don't, fire and worms eating away at the soil will return that carbon to the air. If you want to mitigate the fact that burning coal makes the ocean more acidic, take 7 tons of pulverized limestone for every ton of coal you burn to mitigate the effect of burning the coal. So you throw 7 tons of limestone. One thing you might do is fertilize algae in the ocean with iron, but there's a potential for red tide causing problems. One thing that I just read very recently that was really good was this particular seaweed here, 1% of it added to grazing feed could reduce flatulence and yield on the part of cows and sheep and things like that, and yield effectively an 18% reduction in the greenhouse effect if it was done globally. So that could really be significant, you know. And one of the things, I recommend a full court press on this issue because it's very critical, and you got to do everything you can. Okay, these are some sunscreens that have been suggested. Water mists over the ocean, that might work. Sulfates in the stratosphere is a mirror in space, totally impractical. But whatever you do with these sunscreens, they must be maintained, you know. And one of the terrible things about that is if it allows you to keep producing more and more carbon dioxide, and then you can't maintain the sunscreen because civilization has collapsed or whatever, all of a sudden, now you have a huge extinction event on your hand, and humanity could go down the tubes along with it, you know. Stratospheric sulfate droplets also, they reduce ozone, they increase acid rain, it'll increase the jet stream instability. It'll reduce rain in most regions. And one of the things with all these geoengineering things is some regions will suffer. How are you going to decide who suffers? How do you make that decision? Okay, here's some biocapture techniques. Okay, right now the biosphere sequesters a small fraction of the carbon we emit. Forest could increase more, but that would reduce pasture and farmland, and also would require intensive forestry, which would drive green people nuts, because it would require fertilization, pesticides, irrigation, and harvesting. All these things, you know, not natural forests, managed forests, highly managed forests. A recent revolution in photosynthesis. 40% increase in photosynthesis requires genetic engineering, though. Okay, evil genetic engineering. I'm being facetious, all technology fixes have potential negatives. Trade-offs are required. You got to look into things. Carbon capture and sequestration right now is totally impractical. $600 per ton of carbon dioxide. It's ridiculous. The problem is, whenever you try to extract carbon dioxide from flue gases, you've got to deal with the fact that 80% of that gas is nitrogen. It's very difficult to separate it out. Then you have to pump the carbon down into porous layers. That's not too bad. If you can get the cost down to 100 tons per carbon dioxide, you're still make coal 7 times more expensive to burn. Even if you get that cost down to $100 per ton, you're still making coal 7 times more expensive to burn. But in the future, we might need it. So one of the things you might do is you might electrolyze water in order just to extract the hydrogen, which you could use as fuel to make cement, for example, or to fuel an airplane, or fuel other ways of vehicles, so you need carbon-free energy, and use the oxygen to burn with biofuels and capture the CO2, because all you're producing is CO2 when you burn it with oxygen, with pure oxygen, CO2 and water. So you're not dealing with the extra nitrogen. This is my own idea. I could patent that. I'm giving it away, though. This is public disclosure, so it's being given away. Use the other approaches with biofuels to reduce atmospheric carbon dioxide. Convert natural gas to hydrogen with zero carbon dioxide emission. This has real potential. I saw this in an article recently. It could be very cost effective. It's much more cost effective than removing carbon dioxide from flue gases. You could use it to produce transportation fuel or energy for industrial processes. You can produce electricity at the same time, and you get hydrogen for home heating, and this could be very important. Get the natural gas industry on your side. Get their lobbyists working for you. And you might need these carbon capture things to rescue us from a real disaster at some point in the future, so you ought to be working on it. Okay, nuclear is needed for baseload power. We burn when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. We need this 60% reduction. Long-term energy storage is not there. People think that nuclear is a million times more risky than coal. The reality is exactly the opposite. In the time that nuclear has been around, coal has killed almost 1 million Americans with air pollution from lung diseases, bronchitis, emphysema, etc. Nuclear has not killed a single American member of the public yet. Not one. We can use reprocessing to reduce the volume of the waste, the way the Brits and the French do. We're facing the collapse of civilization due to global warming. We've got to deal with this in a way that works. We need baseload power. We have to take some risks. With nuclear waste disposal, Right now, Yucca Mountain is designated as a site. It's in the middle of a nuclear test range. Hundreds of nuclear weapons were set off there above and below ground. But that was okay because that was for national security. But now they're talking about putting nuclear waste there. Oh, it's the devil's work. Can't do that. If we reprocess, we could greatly reduce the amount of waste, the volume of waste, and Yucca Mountain would have plenty of capacity. It's standard process in Europe. And if you do the reprocessing, they're not doing this now, you could separate out the short-lived stuff from the long-lived stuff. The long-lived stuff you could burn up in fourth-generation reactors as fuel, and the short-lived stuff would be good in a couple thousand years. So stick it in a pyramid, ask the pharaoh to move over. He won't object. The nuclear fuel is plenty available. It's a non-issue. People who say nuclear is not the answer, say there's not enough nuclear fuel. This slide points out that there's plenty of nuclear fuel. And if you go to a fourth generation reactor based on thorium, there's plenty of fuel there. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to gloss over this. In the question session, we can come back to it, if anybody wants. This slide here has some future reactor technologies. The AP1000 is advertised to be 100 times safer than present reactors because it has gravity-fed cooling water and modern control systems. High-temperature gas-cooled reactors cannot melt down, and accelerator-driven systems can't melt down. They can't run away. They can burn low-grade fuel. They can breed thorium. And thorium-based fuel breeder reactors don't have much less long-lived waste, 1/2000th part of the long-lived waste. They can't be used to make nuclear weapons, and there's 10 times more potential fuel available. This shows you how a accelerator-driven fission system works. You have a beam of protons that you just blast into a pile of thorium or uranium or whatever, and cause the atoms to split. As soon as you turn off the beam, the thing stops. This is the thorium-based reactor, a liquid reactor, and this shows you the relative amounts of long-lived and short-lived waste relative to what you'd get from a conventional system. It's much less, like 1/2000th for the long-lived waste. This is the AP1000. The emergency cooling water sits in a tank above it so that it can be gravity fed, doesn't require electricity to feed it. So I advocate developing safer nuclear power, implements the safer designs, reprocess the waste, and develop the thorium-based fuel reactors. This is what we've got to do, or cook the planet and risk the demise of our civilization. Now, last time I gave this talk, I got a question on nuclear fusion. Unfortunately, nuclear fusion was set back 20 years by the 1995 Congress, refusing to fund the ITFR. Set the whole thing back by 20 years, and so it won't be coming out. The electricity won't be coming out of the wall until 2050 from this, and the reactor won't turn on until 2025. I've been working on ideas on this particular technique for doing it. I just found out by talking with Daniel Jasby and exchanging emails with him that it's kind of a plan B potential. And it in fact works, but anyway, the burning plasma is the way people are going to go. One of the most important things that people can do is to limit population. But of course, this creates problems, because there's so many people that consider this the evil. Anyway. But this is the per capita emissions in America are about 15 tons per year, and about five of that is transportation and cars. Anyway, this, so, if we could reduce, the number of people in America, that helps a lot. But worldwide is important as well, because everybody wants to live at an American standard of living. And so that's problematic. This slide shows you how much you can reduce by various techniques, but being a vegetarian only reduces you by 0.8 tons now per year. Now that out of 15. Now that number may be low. I'm going to have to look into it. I got that out of an article in a British newspaper, so I'm going to have to look into it some more. But anyway, I'm not sure. It may be low. Okay, so some recommendations. Build safe nuclear reactors for baseload power. Develop other carbon-free sources, wind, solar, and energy. I recommend a full court press on this. Do everything you can that makes sense from an engineering point of view, but make sure it makes sense. Geothermal, tidal, hydro. Develop carbon sequestration for future biofuels, cement, and steel plants. Proactive government policies. Contribute your vote, your money, and your efforts, social media, and talk to your friends. It's very important, personal communication. We need subsidies for fuel-efficient vehicles and home energy efficiency. Nuclear power, we need incentives for nuclear power in the form of subsidies and liability insurance. We need carbon taxes on power plants and processes. But watch out for again, the gas guzzlers ought to be taxed when you buy them, as opposed to at the pump. Support limited population growth, like Planned Parenthood. It's one of the charities I contribute to, is Planned Parenthood, international and national. We need research on efficiency, energy storage, thorium reactors, and fusion. Energy efficiency, of course, is important. Plug-in hybrids and electric vehicles. If your electricity is low carbon. If all your electricity comes from coal, you don't necessarily want to go to an electric vehicle. My plug-in hybrid would be getting the equivalent of 40 miles per gallon if all my electricity were coal, not 250. Drive slower, don't tailgate, constant braking. Service your car, keep your tires inflated. It's important to have your tires at high pressure. Heat pumps for heating a house and cooling it. Heat pump is just running an air conditioner in reverse. Sucks the heat out of the outside, pushes it into inside. Insulate your house. Insulate yourself. Wear sweaters and set your thermostat low. Insulate your attic, your windows, your drapes. Keep your drapes shut. Shut out the sun when the sun is shining in, and instead of cranking up your air conditioner. Use LEDs and compact fluorescents. Hang your laundry wet. Keep your furnace serviced. Check your refrigerator seals. Plant trees and shade. Use buses and carpools. Group your errands. Avoid air travel. I had to take an airplane to get out here, but I grouped. My mitigation is I grouped about 4 functions here. Okay. Anyway, so I'm doing about 4 things for this trip. This is one of them.
Don't mention bicycles.
Yeah. The comment is that I don't mention bicycles. Yes, and actually, it's. Well, part of it is it's dangerous. Bicycles are quite dangerous. Yeah. Anthropogenic global warming might destroy us. Never mind. Let's not take risks. I've only got 2 slides. Let's stop. Let me finish, please. Politics is corrupted by fossil fuel money. Anthropogenic global warming denial has normalized lying. We need laws like a list of funders, like a list of ingredients. You have a list of ingredients on what you eat, have a list of ingredients on what goes into your brain. When you have political ads, there ought to be a list of funders on those ads, and HR 1 has something like that. We need free TV time for the candidates. If the FCC decided that it was part of your licensing process to provide free funding, ABC, CBS, and NBC would have to provide it. Oh, ABC doesn't want to agree to it, XYZ will take their license in the blink of an eye. Right now, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is in Congress right now, 763. It's a carbon tax. It's revenue neutral, though. 80% of the public would gain financially from it. 20% would lose. Don't accept denial. The scientific consensus is solid. We need effective action, ASAP, conservation, carbon-free energy sources, renewable storage, and nuclear. Get our government back, canvass, contribute money, talk to your friends. Don't be polite about this. It'll be impolite to your children. Oh, geez. Okay, this is the last slide. Terrorism can and won't destroy our civilization, but global warming could and might. I would add that Syria may be just the beginning of drought-induced collapse. Who is next? This is a quote from Paul Krugman, who writes for the New York Times. Anyway, that's my talk. Thank you.